Again, my name is Nicole DelToro. I am the founder of Andersen, and we're so excited to be able to present this webinar for you, Beyond Big Four, a career planning tool. Many of you are familiar with our firm, but for those of you who aren't, I would like to just give you a quick overview. Basically, we founded Andersen in 2002. I founded it along with Brooke Fisher, who is our VP of Recruiting and Client Service. We have an incredibly talented group of both industry professionals and recent grads who help support our recruiting efforts. And we're so honored today to have such an amazing panel of former Big Four auditors available to share their experiences with you. So in terms of what we do, we have a niche focus, and that's within finance and accounting within the Metro DC area. So our client organizations range from large Fortune 500 companies to startups and literally everyone in between. And the searches that we work on range from CFOs to staff accountants and everyone in between. But what this niche enables us to do is it provides us a tremendous amount of information so that we can offer a consultative service to both our client organizations and individuals. So with the client companies we work with, we counsel them on organizational development of their finance departments, on recruitment strategy and execution of that strategy, as well as keeping them updated about the general labor market conditions. With individuals, we're able to counsel them not only on current opportunities, but really on a more holistic career planning strategy, taking into account their short-term goals and long-term goals, so we can help them make the right move at the right time. So what I'd like to do before further ado is allow our panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll jump into question and answer. Please don't hesitate to submit questions online. We've already had some questions come through. So I have some questions prepared, but I'll also pepper those with some of the questions that are coming in from the participants. So once again, I'd like to thank you all for participating. And Liz, can I ask you to give us a quick introduction of yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Liz Butler, and I am the Director of Operations for Pipaya Partners. Pipaya is a boutique M&A accounting and consulting firm. We provide M&A buy-side due diligence and sell-side accounting support services, primarily targeting middle-market government contractors. My role in the firm is to provide all the back-office support, internal support and administrative operations at the firm. So that ranges from finance, accounting, and budgeting to HR, recruiting, policy, marketing and client events, basically anything and everything regarding daily operations and making sure that runs smoothly in our firm. And I work very closely hand in hand with the partner and founder of our firm to make sure all of our objectives are being met. I started out my career much like everyone else on the call today. I started out as an auditor with Andersen and left as a senior and took some other opportunities in industry. I've worked a wide spectrum of companies and industry, ranging from a small private startup under $1 million type companies to very large public over $1 billion companies. And really most of my focus has been in accounting operations, and my role currently with Pipaya is just a really natural extension and progression of my accounting operations background. So I look forward to all the questions today, and I thank you, Nicole, for allowing me to be on this panel.
Thank you, and thank you, Liz. Liz, as everyone on this panel is, they're all old friends, and again, it's such an honor and such good fortune to have the three of them with us tonight. So Mike, can I ask you to do a quick introduction as well?
Absolutely. Thanks, Nicole. My name is Mike Soto. Most recently, I was the CFO and treasurer of VEREIT. VEREIT is a public net lease company based out of New York and Phoenix. It's about $18 billion of assets. Commercial space, from a roles and responsibilities perspective, oversaw accounting, finance, FP&A, IT, and HR. Like the other panelists, my career did begin in public accounting. I am a vintage KPMG alumni, worked in the McLean and as well as the DC office for approximately 4 years. With Nicole's help, I left public in 2003 and went to an organization called Capital Automotive, which is now a private REIT. It's based out of Tyson's Corner, about $4 billion of assets, owning niche assets, owning car dealerships. At Capital Automotive, and we'll talk about it later, I'm sure, I went there as a senior accountant. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I was the head of all capital markets, structured finance, as well as oversight over the chief accounting officer and the accounting function. So looking forward to your questions as well.
Thank you, Mike. And Julie, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Nicole. My name is Julie Pangelinan. I started my career at EW, which a lot of people on the call probably don't even know what that is, or Ernst & Winnie's prior to becoming Ernst & Young. But then left after a few years and spent the majority of my remaining time in public accounting at BDO Seidman. Both started in the Los Angeles office, then did a secondment to the UK, and then came back to the DC area. After public accounting, I went to Marriott and was there for 6 years. I headed the accounting policy and SEC reporting departments. Moved on to Sunrise Senior Living, initially as the Chief Accounting Officer, and then was promoted to the CFO role at Sunrise Senior Living. And most recently, I was the CFO at a company called Geeknet. Geeknet has a website called thinkgeek.com that has all sorts of cool gadgets, toys, and apparel with geeky themes like Star Wars and Star Trek and Doctor Who. Had a great time there, but that company got acquired by GameStop in the middle of last year, and we just recently transitioned the accounting function to their headquarters in Texas.
Excellent, thank you. Julie has a successful track record of selling companies and putting herself out of a job. The danger of being a successful CFO, but we could talk about that a little bit more. And I apologize, that's a typo on our end under Julie's experience for EY. Julie was there for 2 years and then moved on to what was eventually BDO Seidman, so I apologize for the typo there. I'd like to start with Liz, if you don't mind. Liz, many of our candidates come to us interested in an analyst role. Many of them think they don't want to do accounting, don't want to do audit any longer. When you left Andersen, that's the move you made. Can you tell us what you did in that role, what you liked about it, and then why you eventually moved back into more of an accounting role?
Sure. So my role at that company, as a small healthcare company as a financial analyst, was basically gathering all the contract data that they had, creating contract summaries, monitoring all the contracts and gathering all the data, and really putting that in terms of profitability and different operating metrics, and reviewing that on a monthly basis is pretty much what I did there. I was probably like a lot of auditors thinking it was going to be glamorous and exciting and, and all those things. It definitely was a great start to my career and an interesting, I guess, segue out of public accounting. I took that job because I didn't want to be in debits and credits. That wasn't my thing at the time, and that's not what I was looking for. So it was a good alternative. I ended up moving out of that role and into corporate accounting eventually, because part of it was because I wanted to leave that company itself because it wasn't very profitable or stable. So I was looking for different opportunities, and my next opportunity happened to come through a recruiter, and it was an amazing role leading an accounting operations group, pretty large group at a public company that had just gone public that year. So it was a pretty exciting opportunity for me, and I couldn't pass it up.
Excellent. Okay, great. Thank you for that. Mike, I know we're going back a few years. I don't want to date either one of us, but when you left KPMG, it was for a senior accountant role. When you left, maybe you can give us an idea as to why you decided to leave KPMG for Cap Automotive at that time. What were the main drivers for you? What were you focused on? Why was that the right move, leaving public accounting?
Sure. So, Nicole and I think we had dialogue for a couple of years. I would not consider myself at that point in time to have been someone that was actively in the job market. I was happy at KPMG, but curious what else was out there and what was on the other side. Candidly, I think when you're in public, you consider yourself ultimately to be someone that wants to go the partner path or not. I chose the latter. Wanted to get into industry when I felt like I found the right thing for me. I ultimately left in 2003 as a 26-year-old, dating myself here. Frankly, some of it was compensation based. Also, it was people based. What I think I've found through that experience, as well as other experiences, are the fit itself is so important. So I really left to go to an organization that was pretty sizable in terms of assets, but a very small office of about 40 people. Thinking that, as someone coming in to be the technical guy, at that point in time, it was the height of Sarbanes-Oxley implementation. I was the SEC, guru for that company. I felt like I'd get enough exposure to the C-suite, as well as even to my management, the controller and assistant controller, that it was a worthwhile move for me at that point in time.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's very helpful. Julie, just for, many people, when they're in public accounting, a lot of what they do is policy or SEC reporting, and they think they don't necessarily want to do that afterwards. Many people see it as more of a compliance function versus value add. Based on your roles at Marriott and then Sunrise, as a chief accounting officer and heading up policy and reporting, can you describe how you feel it adds value to the business beyond just maintaining compliance?
Sure. So when I was at Marriott, our accounting policy group, in addition to writing the technical accounting memos that the auditors needed for their files, and we needed to support positions, we were part of a collaborative deal team. And that included a member of, the deal lead, a member from the development department, a member from the law department, from the feasibility group. And collectively, that entire group analyzed all aspects of the deal. So on the accounting policy side, I'll give you an example. Let's just say you're looking at a real estate transaction and maybe you're trying to sell an asset. Let's just say Marriott wants to sell a hotel. Well, if you know ahead, if the deal person knows ahead of time the accounting implications of doing various things, like for instance providing a guarantee to the buyer that if that happens, then a sale accounting may not be able to be achieved and a gain may not be able to be recognized. Well, that's important to the company. So it's important to have the accounting policy team linked with the other members of the team, understand what the accounting implications are, because ideally you'll be able to structure a transaction that meets the company's goals while achieving the accounting goal that you want to at the same time. The importance is getting there early, educating everybody. Deals are all about trade-offs. So there may be something that absolutely doesn't work from an accounting perspective. That means the deal lead's going to have to give something somewhere else in the deal, but hopefully you get to the same economic answer.
Mm-hmm. Okay, excellent. So even for people who are interested in being in more of a deal type role or a strategic type role, it sounds like they can get that from a policy in corporate.
Absolutely. I mean, I would say being part of that deal team at Marriott, I had exposure to the top levels of the company. We would routinely meet with Mr. Marriott on large things to present that. So it's a way for for you to have an audience with members of the executive team and really be able to show your stuff.
And if I remember correctly, Julie, that group was fairly small despite how highly focused it was. So even someone who was in that group as maybe a manager or a heavy senior would have had some of that same executive level exposure. Would you say that's correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So my team there, which was SEC reporting and accounting policy, we only had 7 people in total. And yes, I mean, I would always bring my number 2 along with me to those meetings to give them that exposure.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think that's very helpful. I think our participants will find that very helpful. Liz, the next question is for you. So many of many of the people we work with want to get completely out of accounting. They just want nothing to do with it, and they want to get into operations. I know you talked a little bit about it earlier, but can you tell us again what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, and what you like about it, if there's anything you don't like about it, so people understand what does operations really mean?
Well, at our firm, it's wearing many hats. So it's really anything internal back office support. So if you think of a company that has an accounting department, a legal department, some admin people, different things internally that aren't client service, it's all that in one job. So it ranges from, I spend about 25 to 30% of my time in accounting. This week I'm closing the books like everyone else and sending out invoices to our clients and things like that, preparing a financial reporting package for our partner. So that's my focus this week. I've also been hiring, so in hiring mode. So I'm vetting through resumes, doing phone screens, getting candidates in the door, that type of thing. It changes all the time what I'm focused on. There's, I help draft engagement letters. I help organize client events and internal events and things like that, and also maintain our office space. So it's really a wide gamut of things, and you have to be very flexible and able to shift gears and shift focus many, many times throughout the day, which is what I do.
Excellent. Thank you. So, Mike, the next question is for you. Many of the people we work with, they want to become a CFO eventually. As we talked about, when you left KPMG, you left for a senior accountant, which many of the people we work with right now wouldn't necessarily see that as fast-track to CFO. But can you tell me about how your career has progressed for you to be able to get to that point in a relatively short period of time?
Sure, and I would say, the general message for me would be, it's one foot in front of the other and taking each obstacle as it comes. I certainly didn't leave public accounting with imminent aspirations of becoming CFO. I would say I've been, I think, a good steward of the companies I've worked for, and I've been fortunate as well. At Capital Automotive, where I worked for 11 plus years and came in as a senior accountant, I was promoted many times throughout the years. I would say, and my recommendation would be, is take care of your responsibilities. Make yourself a trusted partner, not only to the people above you but below you, to the extent you're looking at opportunities and you can get the visibility, as Julie was just mentioning, to Mr. Marriott or whomever it is, and you have confidence that your voice will be heard. It will be heard. Throughout your career. Good work will be valued in compensation and progression. So I would not look so far out as to you can have long-term goals, but we all live busy lives professionally day to day. So I would just say do your job, do it well, and it'll help you in that progression.
Excellent, thank you. And there are always trade-offs. In a perfect world, you would have everything in an opportunity, right? The perfect company, the perfect people, the perfect role. But a lot of times I talk to our candidates about, if you have to have a trade-off, is it better to work in the right company, maybe in a role that is less ideal? If you're in a dynamic company, there will be opportunity, even if you go in as an accountant. Versus taking that ideal role, but in a company that is maybe less dynamic, isn't growing, is stagnant, or maybe it's not the right people. So I focus on right company, right people versus right role. But I would love to have all of your thoughts on that. Maybe I can start with you, Julie, what you think about that trade-off.
I agree with that. You want, right company, hopefully the company's growing. There's people within the company who can mentor you and help get you to the next level. I would agree with that.
Okay, great. Liz or Mike, do you have a comment? Would you like to jump in?
I definitely agree. I've made the mistake of taking on a role in a company that wasn't exactly a great fit culturally for me, and it didn't work out because I just didn't fit in, if you will. So I think the right company, a place that's growing and has a lot of opportunity is definitely, a good place to be.
Excellent, thank you. Mike, any thoughts?
I agree. I would, the business model has to work. You have to have some appreciation of how you make money. But I would say at the end of the day, the right fit from a personality perspective will be the most important thing for somebody in terms of long-term sustainability as well as success.
Great, thank you. And I found that, many people, obviously we all want to work for a company that's growing, that's profitable, that's fun, but sometimes the best opportunities or the best professional opportunities can happen in distressed companies. I don't want to put anyone on the spot to talk about distressed companies they've worked at, but I'd like to give the three of you an opportunity to maybe jump in if you feel comfortable talking about a situation you were in where maybe it was a very challenging time for the company and how that gave you tremendous professional opportunity.
Well, I can chime in with my experience at Sunrise. First of all, when I left Marriott, I could have been very happy staying my entire career at Marriott. It's a great company. There's always interesting things going on within the role, the accounting policy role. You always got exposure to to good people. But it was the opportunity for me to get to take it to the next level and be a chief accounting officer. So I got there, and shortly after I got there, realized that there were some issues with how we were doing equity accounting and real estate accounting, and we ultimately ended up being in an accounting restatement for 2 years. That was very challenging and stressful, as I'm sure anybody who's ever been through that experience can attest. But we were persistent, and we got through it. And then we really breathed a collective sigh of relief in the middle of 2008, and the economy collapsed out from under us. And then it was a different kind of stress. This was trying to save the company from bankruptcy stress and selling assets, selling excess land, getting out of ventures, getting out of management contracts, shutting down a development department, 5 rounds of layoffs in an effort to stabilize the company. And we did at the end of the day. So again, very challenging times, but I always tell people that during my 5 years at Sunrise, I got 10 years of business experience, and it propelled my career. And I think that's the message here, is that even in challenging times, it gives you the opportunity to step forward and prove yourself. And sometimes people don't get that opportunity. They may be equally as talented as you. They just haven't had that adverse situation to be able to step up and prove themselves. But for me, especially during the downsizing, I was able to wear some different hats. And so when our CFO left, the board felt very comfortable that I had demonstrated the ability to be more than just a good chief accounting officer. I'd become treasurer, I'd taken over the purchasing function, so it was just the next logical step for me. So I think the message to everyone on the phone listening is, don't run for the hills just because it's a bad, something bad is happening at the company. If you roll up your sleeves and you can get in and be part of the fixing of the problem, that's going to propel your career.
Excellent, thank you, very helpful. Mike, do you have any comments?
Sure, and I come from a unique situation as well. I would echo some of Julie's thoughts. I left Capital Automotive in the middle of 2014 with a very nice gig, as I thought about it. Performing all the CFO roles. Got approached by another entity in New York, which was VEREIT, my former employer, to come there. Within 5 weeks of coming to that organization, found out we had an accounting whistleblower, and within 10 weeks, we ultimately had to pull 4 years of financial statements due to unintentional and intentional accounting misstatements. The entire C-suite, 5 individuals all resigned. Board of directors asked me to take a CFO position as we needed to right the ship. It was something where we lost $3 billion of equity market cap in 1 day, and we were in default under all of our corporate loan agreements. We're quite sizable entity itself. It was a very trying time for me. It was one of those things where I had the option to stay and take on the CFO role and do what needed to be done, even if I didn't know everything that needed to be done. Or I could have gone home. I chose to take the role. It was a very challenging 5 months of my life until we got current on our financials. Ultimately, we restated 3.5 years. It was an overstatement of AFO about 20% per year, plus or minus. My takeaway from it, other than a little less sleep than I would have preferred, was that you don't necessarily need to know what you need to do. You just have to have the conviction to figure it out. So it was an incredible learning process for me. As Julie said, in her experiences, I developed professionally on an exponential level based, as compared to the number of days or months that I actually did that. But I don't regret it in any way. You learn, if you're invested in it, you will learn what you need to learn.
Thank you. Thank you both for that. Liz, we have a number of people we work with who are interested in M&A. Can you tell us in a little bit more detail what kind of work your consultants perform? What is the day-to-day like for them?
Sure. Well, it depends on what type of project they're working on. So buy-side due diligence, ultimately that ends up in a due diligence report that we issue. And so they'd be doing a lot of data gathering, data analysis, income statement, in-depth income statement analysis. We call it quality of earnings, basically, and diving into the income statement, looking long-term at operations in terms of adjustments, earnings adjustments and things like that that may need to be taken into account. So that's on a buy-side deal. On a sell-side deal, it's a little bit more, it varies, depending on our clients and where they are in their process of selling their company. So it could be, producing some reports that they need, helping them get up to speed on that, organizing their financial data, assisting with the forecast, or fielding, due diligence questions from the other side. So that's a little bit not as straightforward, I'd say, as a due diligence report, and that's where you have to really put on your consulting hat and think about what the client needs and how we can get that done for them. And then we also have some other just various consulting projects that usually stem from an M&A transaction. So clients that we've worked with long term, much after a deal is done. And those projects could be FP&A, it could be forecasting, it could be accounting policy type needs, or just interim accounting help and assistance.
Okay, great. And what would you say, I'll give you a chance to sell it a little bit more, but what would you say is the difference or the benefit to working for a boutique firm like Pipaya versus just doing transaction services with a Big Four firm?
Sure. I can definitely answer that right away. You're going to do more than just buy-side reports. Most larger firms focus on cranking out buy-side reports, and that's pretty much what they do. I mentioned the other things that we do, and sell-side is actually one of our specialties and how we really got into the market. But you're going to have a much broader range of projects that you work on, and just a varied experience and a lot of mentoring, hands-on mentoring from our partner and founder.
Right. And it sounds like, from my experience on the sell side, there's a lot of value add to these companies that are looking to be sold or who are entertaining an offer to really be able to coach and guide them. Would you say that's the case?
Yeah, definitely, because sometimes they don't know what they need. They have no idea. They just know that, my investment banker or my attorney told us to hire you. So, it's getting in there and really helping them and educating them through a process as well.
Okay, great. Julie, you've worked in a few different industries. I know some of them related, but how difficult was it for you to switch from, hospitality to senior living and then into retail/technology?
I don't think it was difficult at all. I think, again, all of us and our audience, we have the benefit of starting at a large accounting firm And part of the beauty of that is you do get exposure to different industries. And especially for me, spending most of my career at BDO working on small and mid-sized companies, I audited companies in various industries and various sizes of companies, large companies, small companies, private companies, public companies. So I think we're used to being able to kind of flip a switch and learn a new industry. Really what it comes down to is making the investment up front. So the first thing I did, for instance, when I got to Geeknet, which was retail, and I didn't really have a lot of background in that, is made sure I spent a lot of time with the leadership team, one-on-one with the department heads, really trying to understand their business, understanding the key metrics that are important for that industry. So looking at our company's filings, looking at filings of other companies in that industry. So just doing my homework to try to get myself up to speed as quickly as possible.
Excellent, thank you. Let me just check in on questions coming in. Okay. So I have a few more questions, and then we'll start taking some questions from the audience. I'm going to throw out this to all or whoever would like to answer it. What would you say is one career risk you took, and how did it work out? Anyone interested in jumping on that?
I'll take the lead on it. I'm sure we've all taken our risks. For myself, after KPMG, I was at Capital Motive for quite some time. Frankly, that's a very stable company based in McLean, Virginia. I'd been there. I knew my job and got paid fairly for it. Frankly, my biggest risk was I jumped ship in the middle of 14 and went to VEREIT, based out of New York. Time will tell ultimately whether that was the right move or not. At the time, it was a much larger company by about a five-fold, and the compensation was very intriguing for me. So I don't regret my decisions at all. And as I've spoken to, I learned a heck of a lot in a hazard type of situation, if you will, with cold financials and an eviscerated C-suite. I would say as a takeaway for me, as you guys consider next moves, and I've had 3 jobs in my life, think I can read people pretty well and read companies. I would just encourage you to focus on that because sometimes, there are components, whether it's compensation, title, or otherwise, that seem discreetly to be highly incentivizing to you all, but it's really the whole package in terms of where you go and what you want out of your career. This is coming from someone that, I prefer to be somewhere and work for 5-10 years. So just be very cognizant that if you are interviewing for positions, clearly it's a position of want or need from the company, and make sure you ask the right questions and do your due diligence.
Excellent, thank you. Julie or Liz, any thoughts?
Sure. I left my last role without having another role, so I think that was a pretty big risk for me. But I was a new mom at the time and really made the choice to find something better in terms of a work-life balance, and found a great role in Pipaya. So definitely no regrets here, and I've definitely no regrets, and definitely made a positive move in my career.
Excellent, thank you. Julie?
Yeah, I think for me, probably the biggest risk, I did stay in public accounting longer than your other panelists. I actually made partner at BDO. But part of the reason was because I really wanted to do an international secondment, and that was a carrot, and it kept on getting pulled a little further in front of me. So I ended up staying longer than I thought I would. I really always saw myself wanting to get out in front of things as opposed to behind things like we are in the auditing profession. But again, had a very successful career. Not many people get to that level and then decide to leave and go into industry. So I think that was a bit of a risk, but it was, again, I really wanted to get out on the front of things, and it worked out very well.
Excellent, thank you. I'd love to hear, and I think our participants would love to hear, when you're hiring, what do you look for? Either hard skills, soft skills, And are there certain red flags where if you see certain things, maybe on a resume or in an interview, that concerns you? And I understand you're hiring for different positions, so but in general, if you're looking to hire someone maybe at a senior or a light manager level, which is really our target audience, what do you look for? Maybe I can start with you, Liz.
Sure. So the first thing has to be enthusiasm and interest in the role. You know, you can teach a lot of things, but that's something you can't teach. You can't teach somebody to have a passion for what they're doing or a genuine interest in what they're doing. So I definitely look for that first. Mm-hmm. I'd say soft skills are probably the next thing. So communicating with people, you know, being able to manage people, and just being able to learn quickly and be adaptable and flexible. I mean, those are some of the things that we look for.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. Julie, you've hired a lot of people. You've had large departments working for you. What do you look for?
Yeah, I've had large departments, small departments, and everything in between. I agree with Liz that the first thing I look for is just somebody with a passion and a passion for the role and a level of enthusiasm, just a native intelligence. Because even if somebody hasn't had the specific background in the role, if they just kind of, if they show that they have a curiosity and an intelligence, then I can give them the training that they need to learn that. I also would just say, for accounting roles, I generally am looking for somebody who has gotten their CPA. If they're coming into a GL accounting role, I kind of see that as a minimum to move forward along an accounting career path.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Mike?
Yeah, I agree with Julie and Liz. You know, clearly you need to have a passion for the role that you're interviewing for. I would, you know, as a red flag, I would say, in my experience, sometimes I've interviewed individuals and they've had larger immediate aspirations than what they were in the door to interview for. So I think it's, you know, it's fantastic to have drive and have long-term goals. But I would say the majority of your energy needs to be put forth in terms of the opportunity that you're pursuing. You know, when you get in the door itself, then you can prove your ability to not only do that, but also to pitch in on larger, more creative, you know, possibilities. So I would say, you know, dedication to the role at hand, you know, fit as well is very important from a soft skill perspective, and I don't know what type of advice you give people for fit other than just be yourself, and you know, to the extent it works out, that will be something, as I've said previously, that I think is going to be really important in terms of your success as well as the success of the department that you're reporting within.
Mm-hmm. So we have several people who are asking a question, kind of asking the similar question about the importance of staying until manager. You know, so I think probably you know the Big Four firms advocate and tell their people stay until manager and you'll have a lot more opportunities. You know, some positions that we recruit for look for someone who's made manager in Big Four, but typically by that level, 5, 6, 7 years, most companies want a combination of experience. You know, you talk about GL, someone who's actually closed the books, or someone who's worked with a financial system and managed both professional and paraprofessional individuals. But I'd love to hear from the three of you, not only in terms of your own experience, but when you're hiring, do you feel like it makes a big difference whether someone stayed to be manager? And what roles would you hire that person for versus someone who has a combination of experience if we're looking at 5, 6, 7, 8 years? If it's okay, I'll start with Mike.
Sure. You know, so I left KPMG a year before I was going to be promoted to manager, and knew that was the timetable for myself. You know, frankly, as a hiring individual, I think I would bifurcate my preference to the extent I was hiring, very technical senior levels within accounting. Clearly, I think I would have a preference for someone to be at the manager level. And by senior level, I'm speaking to chief accounting officer, controller, assistant controller. If it's a very large organization, potentially that's a manager role, but it's the very senior, couple of folks within that group itself. To the extent people have aspirations of touching both sides of the house, being the accounting, the operations in whatever way that is, FP&A or core business or otherwise, for me it worked to leave prior to becoming manager. In that realm for myself, it was more important to get out and to get kind of the industry experience. But I don't think either path's an odd one. It just depends on what you want to get out of it. If you're aspiring to be a controller or chief accounting officer, in my mind, or if you want to bifurcate the sides of the house in the organization.
Thank you. Julie, what are your thoughts?
I think in my experience, I think more often people in higher roles, assistant controller, chief accounting officer roles, are probably those people that have had more public than less public. I think, Mike, 4 or 5 years, to me, that's kind of one and the same versus somebody who sort of left, at 1.5 or 2 years. But it's not to say there aren't people who, have left after 2 years and go into a lower level GL role and work their way up. I just think from what I've seen, more often than not, for the higher level positions, usually somebody's had more of a background in public accounting.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Liz, any thoughts?
Yeah, I personally left as a senior. I felt like I knew I wasn't on the partner track and didn't really want to put the time in to work the way through there, but I felt like I had gotten a lot of great experience, especially in managing different audits and different people, and obtaining those skills I think is really important. Mm-hmm. So if people are considering 1 or 2 years, yeah, you definitely can change, but you may want to stay for that senior year to be managing projects. Now, that being said, of course, our firm, we do take auditors with 2 years of experience or more, and once you hit manager, to switch to transaction services at our firm really isn't an option. Mm-hmm. So at that point, you're competing against people that have the transaction experience, that have led those projects, and it really becomes a tough market. Mm-hmm. And that's another thing to consider about industry experience, that the DC area is a really smart, tight job market here, and you're going to be competing against people with much more experience at certain levels.
Yeah. Thank you.
Something I just wanted to say for people at the, maybe the 1 year level or 2 year level in public accounting who, maybe aren't necessarily enjoying it. It does get better. The great thing about public accounting is you get exposure to so many different types of industries and different types of areas in a company. So maybe your first year you're auditing cash and fixed assets, and that's kind of boring. But then the next year you're doing accruals, and then the next year you're a senior, and now you're supervising people. So the job does change, and every year you learn more and just become more experienced. And I think from my perspective, if I see somebody who's left for sure before they've made senior, that to me, it says they just didn't have a certain stick-to-itiveness to them. Yes, it's hard. You work a lot of hours. You're the lowest person on the totem pole. So, but part of it is just kind of getting through that, getting that experience, and getting yourself to a better place.
Right. Yep. And I think that can be the case in corporate also, right? The same can be said for being willing to, dive into a month-end close and realize that that's not your career forever. It's a series of building blocks. And taking that experience and building upon it. It's regardless of where you are, it's hard to be the CEO or the COO or the CEO, CFO. So it's a matter of being somewhat patient with your career and seeing it as a series of steps to learn from. It's interesting, when this point came up a few days ago, so I polled some of my my contacts who had been senior managers at Big Four firms, and I asked them what their thoughts were on, staying to make manager, staying to make senior, what would be ideal. And overwhelmingly, the people that I talked to all wish that they had left Big Four earlier. They wish they hadn't stayed as long as they did. And most of them wish they would have left either right after making manager or even as a senior. So it's just interesting anecdotally in terms of other people's perspectives. Any other questions from the audience, Troy? Let me get back to the questions, and I think we're going to wrap up relatively soon. We have a few more minutes. So I guess Liz alluded to work-life balance, having a family. I would love to hear Mike and Julie's thoughts on how to balance work obligations and very high-pressure roles with a personal life. Both of you have been CFOs of public companies. How do you balance your personal life and your professional life?
I guess I'll start, Julie. I mean, I think it's tough. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm lucky enough to have an understanding wife who's successful as well, but I think you have to, on both sides of the equation, your employer, because we all have people we answer to even at the C-suite as well as at home, establishing, parameters that work for everyone. To be fair to it, I think from a work-life balance perspective, at work it's busy. But that doesn't mean you can't be home at certain times as a reasonable time to have dinner. It doesn't mean you can't be home on the weekends. But I think from an employer perspective, there's generally an expectation that you're available. So I would say you really have to establish trust, the right parameters in terms of what works for you as well as the organization, and being flexible in terms of there are going to be not only your quarter ends, your year ends, there's going to be capital markets activities, block transactions from a sales or acquisition perspective in my world, that are going to require a lot of time. So, work-life balance is a very important thing, and I know it gets a lot of focus today. I would say in these roles, you can have that from a geography perspective, but you have to be realistic that they can be trying roles, and with that come rewards certainly. But that's that's been my experience.
Okay, great. Thank you, Julie.
I think to start off with, you have to be very, very organized. So, for instance, if you still want to get your exercise in, you got to schedule it in. You have to schedule in what's important. So, if you have a child's band concert that you need to go in, you make that a hard block on your calendar, and don't deviate it from that unless you absolutely have to. That doesn't mean that when you get back home from that band concert, you're not going to have to get online and review a next draft of a document. So as Mike said, at our level, at the CFO level, I guess the good and the bad of today's technology is you're always on. You're always expected to be available. You always have your phone with you, and you may have to jump back on, but you can be flexible, and you can go home and have dinner with your family, and then get back online at 8 o'clock and work till whenever if you have to. This is kind of a matter of scheduling it out and making it a priority. I mean, throughout my career, I've done that for myself. I've also done that for my team members, and had a very flexible work environment, and that generates loyalty, and people stay with you, and that's important.
I've also found that, and Julie, I think this applies to some folks that worked for you also back at IHR that I know, but the farther along you get in your career, the more flexibility you can have when you need it, because you have really marketable skills, and you've proven yourself as someone who is effective and gets the job done. So if you get to the stage where maybe you want to work part-time, or maybe even take a little bit of time off, if you've gone to a certain stage in your career, it's a lot easier to do that than if you get off of a professional track prematurely. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I agree with that. If you've proven yourself, then your employer is going to be much more willing to be flexible with you. I have a great example. When I was at Sunrise, I had a woman who headed our international accounting department, and she wanted to pull back. She had actually come back full time after she had her son, but a couple years later really wanted to pull back to 3 days a week. Being the VP of accounting of international accounting didn't really work as a 3-day-a-week job, but working in that department sure did. So she took a step back to a senior director role. She worked 3 days a week. She worked one day a week from home and 2 days a week in the office. She was a great contributor, got her stuff done, a real team player, and was very loyal because we made that accommodation for her. And she's still at Sunrise today. So, over time, her son got older. She came back. She worked 4 days a week in a different role, and now she's back, and she's she's the controller there, working full time. So that company didn't lose somebody with the institutional knowledge of the company, and she's a huge asset for them today. If we hadn't been flexible with her, she would have left and found something else.
And I think that also goes to overall career planning. Not that you can map out your entire career, but if you can think about what's important to you at different stages of both your career and your personal life, and realize that there are trade-offs, but there are still really good opportunities regardless of what your personal situation is. Excellent. Is there anything I haven't asked? Any last comments or anything else you'd like to mention? Okay. Well, I think I'm sorry, Mike?
I would just say good luck. I don't think you can go wrong if you stay in public or if you selectively choose your path outside of that. Public has great merits to it. Having been someone that that was more than a dozen years ago, I'd say there are great merits in the industry as well. The benefit of public is you see so many different clients, so you see different sectors, and you can hopefully get a better sense of the size of the company as well as the sector that you think you could best perform in.
Thank you. Any parting career advice, Liz?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all solution or answer, and you have to do what's right for you in your career, and just really understand that you're in charge of your career, not an employer or a boss or a manager or something like that. It's really you're planning out your career, and this is something that you need to think about long term, where you want to be, and the intermediate steps to get there.
I think you're absolutely right. With all due respect to two of our panelists, not everyone wants to be a CFO. Many people do, but not everyone does. And so it's good for them to know that there are different paths to take, and that there's still growth. Once they leave public accounting, they won't necessarily stagnate. Julie, any last comments?
No, I guess I'd just say be passionate about what you do, work hard, and never burn your bridges. When you're leaving one company, always make sure that you're leaving on a good note, and you should be successful.
Excellent. Well, and I also want to say to our participants, feel free to use us as a resource. It's not that we have all of the magic answers, but this is all we do all day, every day. So if you have questions about resumes, about career management, career planning, interviewing, salary negotiation, this is what we do. I've been doing it for 20 years, and I have a great team here. So don't hesitate to reach out, even if you're not actively looking to make a change. We're always very honest and very straightforward with people about what their different options are in the marketplace, and a lot of times we'll be the first to say, stay where you are. Sounds like you're happy, stick it out for another busy season, stay for another year. I would like to thank, before I thank our panelists, I want to make sure I thank our internal team here who put this on and did a phenomenal job over the course of the past month. I have Troy, I have Charles, I have Lucy. They've all done an enormous amount of work, and I want to thank them. But then I can't thank our panelists enough Your insight and your feedback and your ideas have just been absolutely amazing, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
You're welcome.
All right, take care. Good night, everyone.